But we do have some breaking news here at the show, as Lucas Patrick has been cleared for practice, and we'll see if he's able to make a return this week against Green Bay with Joe Flacco at that quarterback position. Patrick, of course, was brought in as a free agent this offseason. I think a lot of people were like, oh, really? That was your big move there for the offensive line? That certainly wasn't, something that got a ton of people fired up, right, getting Lucas Patrick in at that guard spot. But he goes down week 1 in that Cleveland game, funnily enough, against Joe Flacco, and it looks like he's going to be ready to make a return. Is that going to make this offensive line completely better? Let's not get carried away here, but I think you got to feel a little bit better than having to roll Jalen Rivers out there and have 2 rookies on your offensive line. Both have struggled a little bit. I think Rivers has kind of hung in there, right? Kind of who would expect that he'd be a starting guard for this team after getting drafted in the 5th round and spending a lot of his offseason at that tackle spot. But Lucas Patrick cleared for practice, barring any setbacks. I think we'd expect him to potentially go out there and play against Green Bay, which should give the new quarterback Joe Flacco an opportunity there to have an offensive line that's maybe just a tick better than what we've seen in previous weeks. Also of note, Germaine Pratt was released earlier this week by the Las Vegas Raiders. Linebacker, obviously, longtime Cincinnati Bengal, had the amazing play against the Las Vegas Raiders in that wild card round when the Bengals finally broke through, got that playoff win and route to a Super Bowl that year. Incredible interception there on that play. Forever a Bengals legend just simply for that play. But he gets picked up and he is reuniting with Lou Anarumo. I think a lot of people thought when the Bengals released Germaine Pratt that he was going to Indianapolis. He didn't. He goes to Vegas, gets cut. Now he's going to Indianapolis. That's a really good football team there in the Colts and a really good defense. And certainly looks like Lou Anarumo was a bit of a scapegoat to some degree. Considering some of the things that transpired, obviously, last year with Cincinnati as a defense. He's got a lot more veterans on that defense for Indianapolis, so he's always been known to have kind of a complex scheme, and with more veteran guys, that allows you to, understand that a little bit better and play better defense there. So it was kind of obvious to me, at least, that he was going to land on his feet. He's proven that he's a terrific defensive coordinator, and he's showing it again in Indianapolis, and he reunites with his linebacker, Germaine Pratt. But let's talk about Joe Flacco. Obviously, we had the live show yesterday breaking the news. That was a lot of fun, but I think there's still some things to unpack as it relates to this. My thoughts really haven't changed on this whole situation. I think when the news broke, I immediately was like, all right, here we go. This is positive, right? This is something that is going to help this football team out. Is it going to be what saves this team and puts them in a position to go to the postseason, and Joe Burrow will be back and Joe Flacco will carry this team to that point? Let's not get carried away here, but they certainly are better today than they were without Joe Flacco. And we kind of went back and forth on this off the bench. Trace Fowler alluded to the fact that he doesn't think it's the best idea for him to play against Green Bay. The plan, by the way, is that he plays against Green Bay. We don't have any concrete evidence of that at this point, but Schefter reported it, and that seems to be the vibe around the team here at this point. And I completely disagree with that sentiment that he should not play. I think you made the move. It's go time. Get in there and see what you got. Again, this isn't a guy that, you signed off the street that hadn't played football in a couple of years, that needs to kind of get back in football shape a little bit, digest the offense. No, this is a guy that's been very close to football all throughout this year, and he started for the first several weeks for the Cleveland Browns at that quarterback position. Now, Joe Flacco at 40 years of age, right? Obviously, he can't move. We all know that. You could argue that of all the quarterbacks in the National Football League, he's the least mobile, and with the 30th ranked offensive line as it relates to pass rush rates, that obviously is not a good situation to be in with Joe Flacco. But he also has never been in a spot with this many weapons, which we'll touch on in a second. But as it relates to him playing against the Green Bay Packers, I just don't think you're in a spot where you can afford to sit there and say, oh yeah, you know what, take your time, get a cup of coffee, relax, right? Try to pick up this offense, do what you do, and then we'll talk to you on the short week going into Pittsburgh. You have to throw him out there because assuming you're going to lose this week against Green Bay, which I don't think, I think your chances of winning increase slightly with Joe Flacco instead of Jake Browning, but Vegas seems like they think it's a half a point difference, as it was a 14.5 point spread, and now after the news, I believe it's a 14-point spread, so not much of a better chance there. But I don't think you can afford to be in a spot where you just ease him into this. No, you made a move. You made a swing. You traded a draft pick, something that Cincinnati as an organization, they do not do. For a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, 5th round pick, nothing. Who cares? Go do it. This is pretty significant for the Cincinnati Bengals. right? I mean, this isn't something that they typically do. It's the 4th in-season trade in organization history. The history of the organization, they've made 4 in-season trades. That's insane. They made one last year, obviously, for Khalil Herbert for a 7th-round pick, a running back to kind of come in and see what he could do. It didn't really do much, right? But they made a trade, and that's certainly out of the ordinary for this organization. All right, the skill guys that they have, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, right? Joe Flacco, all his years in the NFL, I believe he was drafted in 2008. He played with Willie Anderson, right? Willie Anderson, yeah, the guy that, a lot of people think should be in the Hall of Fame, Cincinnati Bengal. How crazy is that? Like, that just shows you kind of the age of Joe Flacco. The fact he's 40 years of age and played with Willie Anderson really is hard to wrap your head around. But if you're Joe Flacco, you got to be excited for this opportunity. Obviously, you're probably a little bit concerned behind this offensive line, but you're sitting there going, wow, I have the opportunity to come in here, be the quarterback. We're still, it's not like the team's 0-5 or 2-3. You have life. You've got a long weeks worth of games ahead of you, right? It's not like, oh, you're going to come in here and start 3 times. Like, no, you're going to be making lots of starts here for the Cincinnati Bengals, and you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to throw to. I mean, that's got to really excite you if you're Joe Flacco. Obviously, you have the concerns about the offensive line. What's that going to look like? I don't know, right? Because Jake Browning, say what you want about him. We've been banging on him here, certainly at the show, and we've been banging on him for the past 3 weeks. But he has a little bit of athleticism, right? He's certainly no Joe Burrow, but he can at least move a little bit back there. Joe Flacco, there's not much of that going on. He's dropping back, he's hitting his back foot, and then he's just kind of there. and you see what happens from there. So we'll see if they can, scheme some things up, get the ball out of his hands quickly. But the one reason why you should be really optimistic is that Joe Flacco, he can make the easy play. He can hit the layups. Jake Browning was missing layups, right? There was stuff out there that as a professional quarterback, it's a short route, it's an easy read. He was failing at that. Joe Flacco's not going to fail at that. Is he going to throw the football to the other team from time to time? Yeah, I mean, he's done that. He did. Maybe that's partially why he ended on the bench. But, I mean, the reality with Cleveland was it was only a matter of time, unless they started off the season, winning all kinds of games. It was only a matter of time before they tried one of their young guys, Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders, right? It was only a matter of time. He understood that, the leash for him in Cleveland as the starter was not necessarily the longest thing in the world. And with the weaponry that he has, there's going to be an opportunity for this team to score some more points on offense. And I think that's why you should be optimistic. And as I said on Off the Bench, look, there's holes all over this football team. Joe Burrow masked a lot of these holes, right? I mean, the defense, we talked about it. Has the defense been better this year? Yes. If the offense was competent, could the defense perhaps hang in there and help you win a game? Maybe. But let's not sit here and act like this is a top 10 defense in the National Football League. They still struggle in coverage. Their DBs are still poor, and Geno Stone is still absolutely awful at that safety spot, and he still struggled to get pass rush on opposing quarterbacks. All those things are true from a coaching perspective. All right, from a staff, top to bottom, obviously I've defended Zac Taylor on here before. It's getting harder and harder to do that each and every week as time goes on, as his team continuously gets blown out. Al Golden, I like him, but okay. Dan Pitcher, what's he proven as the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals? There's not many teams in the National Football League where you match up with the Cincinnati Bengals, and as a Bengals fan, you go, all right, we got the better staff, we're going to be more prepared, and we're going to handle the X's and O's better than the opposing coaching staff. You just don't really feel like that is the situation. So that's another hole. Defense as a whole, right? Coaching staff's a whole. Organization, right? Just winning, right? Being a winning organization, that's a whole. Drafting and developing, that's a whole, right? You've got holes all over the place. And Joe Burrow is able to help overcome some of those holes and make them look non-existent, which just speaks to the greatness of Joe Burrow. But Jake Browning was a guy that it compounded it. It made it look even worse than it even is, which is saying a lot. I'm telling you, as a quarterback in the National Football League, and you guys don't need me to say this to understand this, you're touching the football on every single snap. You're getting the ball. It's in your hands. So no matter how much turmoil there is around you and how much incompetence there is around you, you have an opportunity to make plays and overcome that. And Jake Browning certainly just made things worse. Now with Joe Flacco, he's going to be in a spot where it's like, okay, let's take the completion. There it is. Let's get the ball out of our hands quickly. Let's go through our progression. Let's read the defense. Let's throw the ball away when it's not there. Let's push the football down the football field. It is a crime that Cincinnati has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they haven't been able to hit on a big play, right? Yeah, you had the one in garbage time against Detroit, but, I mean, beyond that, right, I mean, this is the team that should always be a threat to take the top off of defense. And with Joe Flacco, I think there's some elements to that he brings. Is he going to, keep this season afloat, right? That's kind of the big question we've been asking. I don't know. You don't know either. We'll see. All I know is that this weekend against Green Bay, I'm more excited to flip on the TV and watch. I'm more excited on Thursday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers to flip on the TV and say, all right, what do we got here in Joe Flacco? That didn't exist prior to that move being made yesterday with Jake Browning, because you were sitting there looking at the schedule going, oh, my goodness, we're only going into week 6, right? There's all these games in an NFL season. We've got just games and games and games ahead of us, and we've got Jake Browning and Brett Rippon. My goodness, it was a tough spot to be in. Are you in a great spot now? Could it continue to be just as bad? Yep, that's a possibility. But you made a move, you made a change, and you absolutely needed to do that. And now you have Joe Flacco. And I've said before, did we want Jameis Winston? Yeah, maybe, right? Was that more of a fun option, right? Does he, have a little more liveliness to him, right? Is he, a funny guy? Yeah, would he be welcomed in the locker room? Sure. Russ obviously has, won a world championship there as well. But, I mean, the fact you were able to pull this off in the division and hardly, to me, a 5th-round pick, that's nothing to me, right? I mean, you were going to pick the wrong guy in the 5th round anyway, right? So, to me, it doesn't really make any difference. To me, it feels like you got him for nothing. And the fact that you were able to do that from a division rival, that's, by the way, you still play this year. It's not like the Bengals were done playing the Browns, and you were able to get a quarterback on their roster for a draft pick, a day 3 draft pick. I mean, I think you clearly won the trade, right? I'm not quite sure what Cleveland was doing, honestly. I mean, obviously they're kind of a mess themselves, and they probably don't view Cincinnati as a threat, but giving them, the guy that started for you the first several weeks of the year, that's pretty significant for only a day 3 pick. It's not like you got a day 2 pick. It's a day 3 pick. So I think there's reason to be optimistic as we kind of turn the page here and look forward towards the rest of the schedule. Are they going to be able to, hang in there and win football games? Can Joe Flacco keep this team 500? I'm going to struggle with that, by the way. I mean, so many Joes and a Jake as well. I mean, that's a lot of J's right there. But when you look at the schedule, are they going to be able to do that? As we take a look at it here right now. I mean, you have a situation where you go into Green Bay. That's a tough game. And then you have Pittsburgh on a short week. And then it becomes kind of do or die time. Right, because if you lose to Green Bay, which I think most people expect to happen, and maybe you can compete against Pittsburgh at home, but I don't know if you feel great about winning that, then you're looking at a spot where, you got to win the next 2 games in order to keep this thing afloat. Can Joe Flacco beat the Jets at home? Maybe. Can he beat the Bears at home? Maybe. And then you get the bye, and then you spin around and play Pittsburgh once again. You still have 2 games against Baltimore, let's just be honest, they're not Baltimore. Yeah, Lamar might be back for those games, but it's not the Baltimore Ravens. And then you end, obviously, with Miami, Arizona, and Cleveland, and you would hope that Joe Burrow can get back by that point. But looking at this schedule, you're like, can Joe Flacco keep this team at 500? And the greatest question is, how much is he going to be able to overcome? That's the question that we all have to ask ourselves, because there's not many other changes that are going to be made. Yeah, maybe you get more of a spark, more juice in the locker room, but it's the same personnel and it's the same coaching staff. So is he going to be able to drastically improve this team from Jake Browning? And I think he will, just because Jake Browning was that bad. I mean, it's a quarterback in the NFL. I get it. I get their holes all over the place. I understand that. But Jake Browning was downright awful, right? He didn't even look like a backup quarterback. This was one of the worst stretches of quarterback performance that we have ever seen in the National Football League. And I'm not going to say Joe Flacco's even going to play good football or maybe even decent football. But if he just goes out there and plays like he did as the starter in Cleveland, which, by the way, led him to getting benched, it's going to be a significant improvement from what Jake Browning was doing out there on the football field. And that's just kind of the reality of the situation. And some people might not understand that, might not grasp that, but just the fact that this team went from Joe Burrow to Jake Browning, I mean, there is a Grand Canyon in between those 2 players at the quarterback position. It's just, you can't even begin to describe how far off those 2 guys are. And I don't just want to sit here and bang on Jake Browning, But that's just the reality. That is the reality, is those two guys are just that far off. You bring Joe Flacco in, still very far away from Joe Burrow, but the gap at least shrinks a little bit from what it did with Jake Browning. And they had to make a move. They were losing the locker room. They were losing the fan base. As a 2-3 team, that shouldn't happen, right? It wasn't like they were 0-5, even though it felt like they were. And we're going to see what Joe Flacco can do with this team. I would like to see him getting the ball out of his hands quickly. Some play action stuff. You want to go under center. Maybe see if you can run the football a little bit. Lucas Patrick coming back. Maybe that helps out. And then pushing the ball down the football field to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. He's got to be over the moon that he gets to throw to those two guys. And, this is a guy that he can chuck it now. Is his arm as good as it once was? I don't know. Maybe not. But it's still really, really good, right? And with those guys running down the football field, there's opportunity there to score points. And the bar is not – it's not some crazy bar that needs to be cleared. If he goes out there and scores 6 points in the first half against Green Bay, that's a tremendous, dramatic improvement based on what this offense was previously doing with Jake Browning. They scored 3 points on offense in the first half over the last 3 games. They were outscored in those 3 first halves 69-9. That's not close. I have a belief that Joe Flacco will at least be able to elevate that. It literally can't get worse. Right, what's he going to do? Oh, not score points and throw 3 interceptions? Well, that's what Jake Browning was doing, so that's not any worse. That's just the same, right? And I find it very hard to believe that it's not going to at least be a little bit better than that. Now, I'm not, I've never been an NFL quarterback, obviously. I don't know how difficult it is to get, picked up by a team and, you're starting here in a few days. That's got to be really hard. And the new language, that's got to be tough, right? But Joe Flacco's been around. He's made the transition before. He's been signed off the street before, and he's played well before. And I think the Bengals are certainly banking on that being a possibility again here in 2025.